नमस्ते गुरु जी। जय गुरु जी महाराज। जय गुरु जी साध संगत जी। शुक्राना गुरु जी महाराज का सेवादार टीम आप सबका स्वागत करती है। आज हमारे बीच में गलत संगत, गुरु जी के टाइम की संगत आए हैं, जो कि संगत करेंगे। पुष्पल दास अंकल के बारे में मैं आपको बताना चाहता हूँ संगत जी कि पुष्पल दास अंकल जी ने बड़े मंदिर से एक हमें कंटेंट मिला था, फॉर स्टेशन गुरु जी। वो कंटेंट इन्होंने बांग्ला में ट्रांसलेट किया था। तो उसके अलावा लाइट ऑफ डिविनिटी का जो बांग्ला मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट है, वो लाइट ऑफ डिविनिटी का जो बांग्ला मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट है वो बड़े मंदिर में सबमिट किया गया था। तो बांग्ला लैंग्वेज में भी इन्होंने लाइट ऑफ डिविनिटी का काफी कंट्रीब्यूट किया है लिखने में। तो गुरु संगत, ग्लोबल गुरु संगत बहुत आभारी है पर इनका। और इसके साथ ही मैं आकाश शेट्टी अंकल जी आपका स्वागत करता हूँ। इस सेशन को आगे बढ़ाएं। ओवर टू यू आकाश अंकल।
जय गुरु जी। जय गुरु जी। थैंक यू सुरेश अंकल एंड वेलकम पुष्पल दास अंकल।
थैंक यू very much. जय गुरु जी।
जय गुरु जी। Because if I recall properly, somewhere around 2000 2001 was the first time that you came to see Guruji in this birth of yours.
Yes, indeed.
And,
yeah, I did.
हाँ, तो अभी पीछे आपने एक सत्संग किया था, तो आई वॉज फॉर्चुनेट इनफ टू सी दैट सत्संग। और देखने के बाद में मुझे जैसे पुरानी चीजें याद आती हैं, तो चेहरा देखने के बाद में याद आती है। ऑल्दो मुझे इसमें कोई संशय नहीं है कि अगर मैं आपको पहले से नहीं जानता तो भी कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, तो भी कोई समस्या नहीं है। बट इट्स ऑलवेज quite an enlightenment when you see people whom you have seen before, but you didn't know their say association with Guruji, their story and the grace that they received. और गुरुजी के दरबार में क्या नहीं मिलता है, ट्राई टू से दैट, बिकॉज बहुत दफे बहुत सी संगत कह जाती है कि गुरुजी के दरबार में क्या नहीं मिलता। तो गुरुजी आपने रूह को अनमोल गिजा बख्शी, मींस दैट इज द फूड फॉर द सोल। ईश्वर के तसव्वुर को शक्ल दे दी, ईश्वर के तसव्वुर को शक्ल दे दी। अदरवाइज वी वर ओनली इमेजिनिंग हाउ द गॉड ऑलमाइटी वुड लुक लाइक। हम नादानों को बेजोड़ अकल दे दी, हमें अकल नहीं थी। अब जो कुछ भी गुजारा चल रहा है वो गुरुजी की दी हुई अकल से चल रहा है। और क्या नहीं दिया, वो नहीं दिया जो हमारे लिए मुनासिब नहीं था। बाकी हर शय रहमत करम सदा दे दी, इस जन्म अगले जन्म उससे अगले जन्म दे दी। तो विद दीज फ्यू वर्ड्स, पुष्पल दास अंकल आपका स्वागत है। आप अपना सत्संग करें और हमें आनंदित करें। हमें एक बार फिर जोड़ दें गुरु जी के साथ में।
जय गुरु जी महाराज। पुष्पदास अंकल, पुष्पदास अंकल वैसे प्लीज वीडियो खोल सकते हैं प्लीज।
ठीक है,
बहुत दिन हो गए आपको देखे। जय गुरु जी।
थैंक यू। दिखाई दे रहा है? हेलो?
यस यस, यू आर विजिबल।
ओके, थैंक यू।
देखते मारे अमित, देखते मारी।
ও ঠিক ভালো, খুব ভালো। Okay, before I start my satsang to Akash Sethi ji, I didn't, I've heard of you so many times. Today was the first time I had the good fortune of seeing you. And I do recall that when we were translating Guruji's book into Bengali, Light of Divinity, that's when I had the good fortune of translating your satsang, I think, and I still remember it was, I think, a couple of years back maybe, but I do still remember your experience with the Mumbai floods and how you escaped the accident, while you were monitoring refueling of aircraft, I think. So yeah, it was a brilliant experience trying to even translate it. I don't know how much I could bring through. So that only
thankfully एक इंजीनियर का सत्संग ट्रांसलेट करने को मिला, so at least the technical terms would have fallen in place.
well, I hope so. I hope so. Lekin Bengali language is slightly different, and although I tried to, I did volunteer to do some of the translation, but I hadn't been in touch with Bengali since 1992. That's when I passed my school exam and got into engineering. And since then, and even before that, apart from Bengali, every other subject, I studied was in English. And after 1992, I never really wrote any Bengali. I haven't read very little Bengali, over these years. I didn't used to read much at the time, but somehow things came together. But it was only with his blessings.
Yes.
I couldn't imagine. I was trying to get it, part of it translated by someone, who I know who's here. She used to be a journalist with the BBC, but he was like, "Oh, I have to get in the mood first," and making all sorts of excuses. So I got a bit fed up and talked to another friend of mine. So he did one paragraph, I did one paragraph, and then after that, I got into the flow with Guruji's blessings, and it all happened. But yeah, time will tell when the book gets published. We'll know how good it has been. But hopefully, it's not far off the original. So I'll start my satsang. My Hindi is a bit limited, so I'll use English mainly. So it all starts in 2001 July. I was transferred to Delhi from Calcutta. Prior to that, I hadn't set foot outside of Calcutta except on holidays. And the only reason that I took up this job with Siemens was it had a carrot dangling at the end of it. They said that they were going to post me in UK straight away. So when I boarded the Rajdhani Express, flights were not that common back in the day, at least from people with my financial background, middle class. So we always used to take the train. And when I got into, came to Delhi, I was almost like, traveling to office every day with my passport, thinking today would be the day when I'm asked to submit things for visa. But that didn't happen. And it was actually quite a few months that I kept waiting. I kept staying in the guest house, thinking, why should I rent a house or a flat? Because I was going to fly anyway. But things happened, part was running, that I kept being a part of the offshore team, never really traveling to the UK. So that's when I realized that I was to be in here for a long time. And the UK, the foreign posting was nowhere in the distant horizon. So so that's when I got to know Colonel Chatterjee, who who was almost my father's age. He's actually, in fact, a month older than my father. But he was still a good friend. He was a friend, philosopher, and guide. And he's the one who talked about Guruji for the first time. And that he was one of the oldest Sangladis. And that changed my and my wife's lives forever. So the first time we heard about Guruji and we went to Guruji straight away was in July 2001. We were a bit disappointed on the first day because he wasn't there. And we were told that he was visiting Jalandhar, as he did from time to time. So we went back and came back next month when he was back. And this time we were told by Colonel Chatterjee, he trained us basically on what to do there and what not to do. He said, we should just pray silently. And if he's happy with our silent prayers, then he would ask us to stay back for longer. So Chai Prasad and Kara Prasad were for everybody. But then after that, back in the day, he chose people who he would ask to stay back for longer. And there were people who were going for months but had not been asked to stay back. So we didn't have high hopes. We thought we'll pray and we'll see what happens. And surprisingly, on the very first day, he spoke to us, which is quite beyond our expectation. And he asked us to stay back for longer. and that's how it all started. So since then, I think when we were in Delhi, we made it a point. We tried our best to go there this was Empire Rested, to go there every Thursday and Saturday, provided we were in Delhi, of course. So we did that. And then after a time, I think everyone was staying behind for longer. Everyone who was visiting the satsang staying behind for longer. So that rule kind of changed, but it still remains. On the very first day, he asked us to stay back for longer, which was again well beyond our expectations. And that changed our lives. The very first visit changed our lives in many ways. Prior to that, we were in a bit of a going through a rough phase in our lives, as in financially, it was a bit tight because the way things were planned was up to flying off to the UK straight away almost. But that didn't happen, and instead of that, we were having to settle down in a city which was 3 times more expensive than Calcutta. And my wife had a miscarriage, and things were not looking up. And even though she recovered, but the idea was the doctors were watching her, and if things didn't improve, they were thinking of surgical intervention. So from many angles, life was in a bit of a mess. But after the first visit, things kind of fell into place. First thing was it inspired us with a sense of bliss. I'm not an emotionally very sensitive person, but I could feel something was different as we came back from Empire Rested. We could feel something changing. And after that, things started falling in place. My wife's health improved, and very soon I got my foreign assignment, which I was looking for. Although it was not the kind of long-term one that I was hoping for, it was a short and sweet one. It was a spectacular success, and it got rewarded very generously for that. And it also laid the foundation for future sort of steps in my career. So that all that came true, but in time, it all didn't happen overnight, obviously. But the way it unfolded had to do with the first blessing that we had from him. So that's why, if you look at Light of Divinity, you'll see the chapter says, I didn't choose the name, but whoever did, I think it must have been Jitu uncle or Kanan Chatterjee. I don't know who did it, but it actually summarizes the whole thing very beautifully. It says the first visit grants all desires, and that's what it actually did. But health issues and financial issues are one thing, but his greatest blessing came in the form of the birth of my child a few years down the line. But I'll get into that in time. There were a few, so the time that we spent at Satsang had its own light moments as well. For example, my wife always suffered from blood pressure. It was an intermittent issue. Sometimes she would come off medication because she didn't want to get used to that kind of medication at such an early age. So from time to time, she would come off medication, but then something would happen and she would have to, she would get it measured, the blood pressure measured, and she would have to fall back upon medication. So it wasn't really working. So one day, when we were reaching the end of the queue, either for the prasad or for the pranam just before we left the satsang, Guruji said something which we could sense. What he said was in Punjabi, and it was not really the kind of Punjabi we kind of understood. And he said something jokingly about the fact that myself and my wife are both wearing green outfits. We didn't do it intentionally, but it just happened. And he picked on that. And he also said, how did I get this Kuri from Chandigarh to marry me? But my wife had never been to Chandigarh. I think we haven't gotten around to going to Chandigarh yet. But he made that comment. And the thing is, we didn't understand what he said exactly because of lack of sort of understanding of fluent Punjabi. Mrs. Manika Gandhi, who was right next to him, tried to translate, but she wouldn't let him. He gestured to her not to do that. So we were left hanging as to what he exactly said until Singla uncle, who was ever present at the door, regulating entry and exit for people, for Sangatis. He went out of the way to translate that for us. And we were very happy, thinking Guruji considered us fit. At least he could, make some jokes about us. And that made us very happy. And for the first time, next day, my wife's diastolic pressure came out to be a perfect 80. Not 79, not 81, but 80. And that was the first time in life. Now, eventually, so she was able to come off medication, but eventually, at the time of childbirth, she had to go back on it. But that's something different that happens to many people. And then after that, she was able to come off that for quite a few years, until eventually, with age, we all, most of the people that I know have to go on blood pressure medication. So did she, and so have I. But a few years in the interim, she was off medication. Then the overseas assignment. So the first assignment that he sent me to, the one that I said was a great success with the National Assembly for Wales. And that was a project that was managed by the Indian management at Siemens. But that was a quick one. And that was never meant to be for a long term. But back then, I think most of the IT professionals, we all dreamt of going to the UK or the US. I wasn't. Then September 11 happened, 9/11, the bombing, and we thought, it would be a luxury to not lose one's job, forget foreign assignments. So that's what pretty much the attitude was. Everyone that we spoke to, people were, so companies and consultancies like Siemens, they were laying off people by the scores. Every day someone was being called to the boss's office and sort of asked to leave, given a golden handshake or whatever you choose to call it. I was thinking, on the back of a good performance from the last project, I probably would be spared that kind of treatment until one day I was actually called to the boss's office. And I thought, that my days were numbered here now. But when he called me to his room and said that my CV had been sent to a client in England for the National Assembly for, sorry, not the National Assembly, the National Savings. It's a government undertaking, I think, that does things like a few bonds and saving instruments. So they needed a piece of work to be done. It's proper design and development work, and they liked my CV, and they were sending a team of 5. And this was in the resource mode. That's what we call body shopping. So we had chances of extending beyond the limit, the limit of 6 months, because it wasn't an India-based project. It was an UK-based project managed by the client themselves, not by the Indian office. So this was, again, well beyond expectation, because at the time when people were trying to save their jobs, I was being sent on a foreign assignment, that too in the resource mode or in the body shopping mode. So this is the best thing that I could have asked for. And I understood, who was behind it. And if there were any doubts, it became clear in the next few weeks. So just before we left for the UK, that was, I think, it's April 2003. So there was a wedding. So as was the custom with weddings, Guruji's births, so people from Satsang would invite Guruji, and Guruji would ask for a certain number of invitations. And then he would distribute that himself amongst other Sangatis. Now, might end up, some Sangatis would end up getting invited to someone's wedding that they didn't at all know. The families wouldn't even know each other, but they would end up getting invited. But there was, it was not random. It looked like it was random, but it wasn't actually random, because I've heard that people who would show up in those invitations purely to respect Guruji's word would run into people who would sort of who they would uh, with by whose association they would benefit from, either spiritually or in terms of career or work or business. So that used to be the perception. Now I ended up getting invited to kind of a royal wedding. So it was Harminder Singh's daughter's wedding, and Harminder Singh was head of Siemens in India. So he was absolutely the top man. He was many levels above me, and even my boss's boss didn't get invited, but I got invited through Guruji. So when I got that envelope, it was so my name was written by, I think, Colonel Joshi, who was one of the Sangatis, one of the oldest Sangatis. And then there was Guruji's own writing. He just wrote the word England and nothing else. And I was a bit surprised. I thought he knew that I was flying in the next few days, but then why would he write that? Because we all knew that I was going for 6 months. And so it was a bit of a mystery to me why he would do that. And I was going only for 6 months. So I came in 2003, and this is 2023. It's been 20 years and a few months, and I'm still here. So I guess that's what he meant when he wrote that. And it was his way of telling me or people that I'll probably spend the rest of my life in the country that he named. So you can call it, some people say that that's my visa, that was my work permit, that was my permanent residency, and that was my citizenship passport, whatever you call it. But yeah, so that was, I think, what he meant when he wrote those words, or that particular word. But it didn't happen just like that overnight. At times I had my bags packed up quite a few times to go back to India. I think once I wanted to come back to India after my child was born, and I wanted him to go to school in India. I had some misconceptions about the education system in England. I was misinformed. I didn't know that. I thought that Guruji was going to arrange. Sorry. Sorry, can you still hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, because I've just lost my video. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. Can you still see me though? I can see the camera glowing.
I can see you in a bit less of light.
Okay, that's because my okay, I'll just switch on the light here. Although it's a different, does it look a bit better?
Much better.
Okay.
Much better.
Right. Yeah, so I had my misconceptions about the education system in this country, and I wanted my son to be educated in India. So at one point we were looking to go back. Guruji stopped us, and I'll tell you how in a moment. So what I'm trying to say here, I guess, is when he wrote England on that card, it was not just a one-off thing. He had probably thought through and shaped the whole, range of circumstances for that to happen. As I said, I'll quickly, cover the other areas that I have to cover and get back to that. So the overseas assignment that we came to a place called Blackpool, where the client had played a trick, actually. So they had actually done the work, and they wanted us to test it. So they didn't really need developers or designers. They needed testers, but they didn't want to do that. They had called us as developers because they wanted asked to to confirm that they had done their work correctly. So we were going to be their insurance policy, if you like. They didn't. They'd done the work just because they wanted to upgrade their own skills, and they wanted the credit for that. But they wanted us to guarantee to be the guarantor for that. So we did that, and the idea was what was said to be 6 months would probably be over in 4 months. But it did last 6 months. So we were thinking, oh gosh, so unless we were there for 6 months, the company wouldn't even pay for my wife's ticket, air ticket. But then why did Guruji write England on that envelope? So we were thinking all that, but obviously it got extended. So 6 months. After 6 months, I think some people went. I was asked to stay back by the client, and I think I was there for about 1.5 years on a different project. And when that was drawing to a close, I was transferred to another site called Telford, which was like a small village. It was a project for the British Gas, and it was really a small village, nice and quiet to live in for a few months. But then my wife was pregnant at the time. The problem was, so that village had a maternity unit which was run only by midwives. The hospital that had consultants was about 16 miles away. And that was inconvenient because we knew that my wife, with all her blood pressure history and all that, she was going to be needing consultant attention at some point. And so that meant we would have to go back and forth, 16 miles each way. And God knows when actually she's in labor, it could have been the middle of night. Although the ambulance service is quite prompt, it was not ideal to be so far away from the hospital. So we were thinking all that in our minds, but and then Guruji one day appeared in my wife's dreams and said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of everything." So we stopped worrying, and in the next few months, I think we were told that unit where we were working at Telford was going to be shutting down, and we would be moved to Nottingham, which is a much bigger city. And it had one of the best maternity hospitals. It's called the Queen's Medical Hospital. So yes, so we got transferred, and we were from a pregnancy point of view, it was a much better option to be at Nottingham Queen's Medical Hospital rather than the Shrewsbury Hospital. And so we moved, and the next challenge was finding place to stay, because while we were still in Telford, the project ran into quite bit of a rough weather. There were deadlines, very strong deadlines, and which, if not met, would set heads rolling. So we were not even given the luxury of going up to Nottingham. It's a 3-hour train journey to look up houses that we would need, or flats. And it was said that the client project manager would do that on our behalf. So he kept sending us internet links and pictures of houses, but we
Pushpal uncle, your video has stopped. We can't see any movement and can't hear anything. Think needs to be addressed.
it all worked out fine. Although the pregnancy itself was not that bad, but childbirth was, we had to go through a lot during childbirth, and we made it through that only with Guruji's blessings. So while we were while my wife was being regularly monitored at the hospital, so one day when she was being measured, her fetal rate was being measured. It used to be the child heart rate would always be about 180-ish, 170, 180, which was normal. And then one day it was going past 200. And the midwife who was, it's pretty casual about it initially, started getting a bit serious, saying, no, this is now getting too far. So she quickly ran for help to senior colleagues. So I had Guruji's picture, which Guruji had given us personally. So I took that out, I put it on my wife's baby bump and read the mantra. And after that, it went down suddenly, as quickly as it had sort of risen. It came down. So by the time the superior colleagues, the midwife, they came rushing through, it was down to 180. They didn't know why, and the midwife had gone and gotten her colleagues, looked a bit stupid, but we told that no, it was seriously, was going through the roof, which is why she had reacted the way she had. But it had now come down. We didn't, of course, tell them how it had come down because they wouldn't understand. So things like this, kept happening. So I'm only mentioning a couple that are coming to my mind, and a few that we've put down in light of divinity. So all that was going fine until childbirth. So when my wife went into labor, so she was in labor for 2 days in the UK, and I think it's the same as US. They don't encourage C-sections. So they were adamant that it would be natural birth. But the point is, my wife's blood pressure conditions, then, I think the lower blood pressure was past 130, which was a dangerous condition. And they were thinking of emergency C-section. And she was kind of passing out. But they were able to deliver the child safely. But up to that point, it was all right. My wife was delirious, and she had got many rounds of epidural anesthesia, so she was feeling all numb. And as I said, she was delirious, and all that was still normal. But until the next day, when I was told that the child, the baby, was showing some sort of infection, and they didn't know what infection. They picked it up in his blood test, but they had to cover all areas so that, regardless of the type of infection, it got treated. So they tried to do a lumbar puncture on a 2-day child, which was a painful sight to watch, but they didn't find anything, or actually they couldn't even get the fluid out. So they put him on wide range antibiotics. And that was, but they were more serious about the child not passing urine for the first 3-4 days. And some people were saying, some doctors were saying, this is just dehydration. So, push more fluids down the child and it'll be all right. But some of them are starting to suspect his kidney, as the kidney functions were off limit. The other thing was that the reason that they were worried about was, so my child has a 2-vessel cord. Actually, my wife has a 2-vessel cord rather than a 3-vessel cord. And that sometimes leads to complications in the child's kidneys. So they were trying to suspect the kidneys, but they were just holding off on going deeper into the investigation. And the idea was, if in the next couple of days he didn't pass urine, then they would have to do more serious investigations. So they put him on a waterbed, and we kept on touching Guruji's photograph, the same photograph that I just mentioned before. And then one morning, they saw some urines, and that he had passed, and everyone was relieved. So they were okay with the child. But then my wife now was having 105 degrees. temperature, and she had developed a bad urine infection, and she's almost on the verge of getting into a septic shock or something. But luckily, they arrested that in time, and she was given very strong antibiotics, and so which kind of brought her back from close to a very irreversible condition. So the thing is, so Guruji put us to all that grind, because as she used to say, "Ghisega nahi to sona kaise banega." But it was, at the time, it was very stressful because the project had ended, everyone else had left. So I was there with my wife and child, both in ICU, all alone in a completely in a different country, in a new country, with no friends or relatives around. So that was quite a challenging phase. And just as things were looking up, so usually in this country, people go for childbirth and come back the next day or the day after. Whereas for my family, it took 14 days, 2 weeks in the hospital. And I was thinking, I can't fly back to India now. Project has finished. The company was still keeping it there and paying me a salary for 1 month without actually me doing any work. But I had to stay at least for another month, because it's unsafe to fly back with a child. I mean, go on such a long flight with a child, less than a month old, because that could damage their eardrums. So I was thinking what to do. I was asking my manager if he could look up another assignment anywhere in the UK so that I can get there without having to fly, and spend the next few months until my son's eardrums were a bit stronger. And then again, with Guruji's blessing, something turned up in London. So it was with the BBC. However, the constraint was I had to join within a week, because they were holding a training for about a week. And if I had missed that, then that would be saying as good as saying no to the assignment. So with a 21-day-old child who had just been released from the hospital 7 days earlier, my wife was still in a lot of pain. So I, took a taxi from Nottingham to London and put up in a hotel. And I think the training was for 2 weeks actually. So spent the 2 weeks in the hotel. Went back to Nottingham, booked up a house in a flat in London, and traveled back with whatever belongings we had. We didn't have much at the time, because we were always looking to go back to India. But still, I had to hire a van, and we again drove ourselves to London. And that's how, it started our life in London with a 21-day-old child. So, so that was, again, just as things were settling down, in 6 months' time, we realized there was something quite serious that impacted our lives in many ways. So my son was born with severe food allergies. So he was allergic to any kind of dairy, soya, and nuts, definitely. And every other day we would find out new things that he is allergic to, like raw potatoes. If my wife was cooking, she was chopping potatoes and then touching my child, then she would get a rash. But the more dangerous was the first time we discovered it. So it was when he was being weaned away from breast milk. He was given some yogurt, and he wouldn't take it, but we had to force because the doctors had asked us to. But within minutes, he developed, swelling. So his lips, face were all swollen, and he was having difficulty to breathe. Again, with Guruji's blessings, his life was saved because the ambulance was there straight away. Even before my wife had put down the phone from her call to 999, the ambulance people were knocking on the door. My wife was so distraught that she didn't even have the composure to open the door. You have to just press a button and open the door to let them in. My wife was so distraught that she couldn't even get herself to do that. But they had a master key or something, so they came upstairs and took both of them away to the hospital, and his life was saved. But we also knew that it would be very difficult, initial years, unless he grew out of the allergies, which he didn't. So that was one of the main reasons why we couldn't come back to India. So when he was 5, he had a final allergy test, and I was hopeful that his allergies would be cleared and we would come back to India and get him admitted in school. But his allergies had gone worse, if any. So that's when we realized that we were going to be here long term. So so that's how we ended up. At the time, I was a bit upset at not being able to go back to India, because that's where I thought that my child was going to go to school rather than in the UK. But as I said at the time, I had many misconceptions about the education system in the UK. But obviously Guruji knew better, so he he did all he had to do to stop us from moving back to India, because he obviously he thought that we were better off here in certain respects. So so that's how we stayed back, and actually it worked. The education that my son ended up getting, I think he's done very well. He got selected into all the grammar schools. So grammar schools here, grammar schools is a bit of a misnomer. They've not got nothing to do with grammar as such. They're just selective schools run by the state, where you have to sit entrance tests to get into. So my son got into all the top grammar schools in the country, but he also got very general scholarships to private school. We eventually took that. It was not 100% scholarship, but it was quite a high one, so that we could afford the rest. And that has done. He has done very well in studies, as well as he had a knack for music. He used to do a couple of instruments. Now he does 4, and at quite high level. So he's looking at university admissions later this year. Hopefully, Guruji has that covered as well. So that's so these things are not the Light of Divinity, because Light of Divinity was from 2007. So since then there have been other things apart from my son's education. There have been things like my wife had a heart condition. It was detected she was getting frequent pauses towards the morning, 6:30ish. So they monitored her for quite some time. So if the pause in one's heart is more than 3 seconds, then one has to go on the pacemaker. One has to get the pacemaker installed. So my wives were heading in that direction, but they stopped at 2.8. So with Guruji's grace, she didn't need the pacemaker. But at one point, we thought that she would. She also had kidney stones, which were discovered when we were on vacation to India. And in India, it was a 6mm stone, and they said that you need lithotripsy, as in something that a process that breaks down the stones into smaller bits so that they can pass out with urine. It's still a painful process. So we decided we'll get it done when we are back in the UK. And in the UK, when we went so we showed them the scans. They don't accept scans from anywhere else, so they do their own. The National Health Service in the UK, they're a bit adamant on that. So they made my wife undergo another scan. And this time they said, we are not seeing any 6mm stones, actually. So all we are seeing are multiple 2-3mm stones. So in effect, what had happened was the stones had already been broken down to the right size, as would have been achieved by the lithotripsy procedure. So it was Guruji's miracle. So he just did what the lithotripsy would have done without actually having to undergo the painful process. So that was that. They monitored her for a couple of years more, just in case. But then they discharged her from that clinic. My son's allergies, the first about 10 years of his life, were quite restrictive. In many respects, he would not be able to eat anything outside. Very specific outside food in only known restaurants, maybe at times. So my wife would have to cook every meal. And even then, we would be, waiting for calls from the school saying, oh, he's getting a rash from something and so on. So, and when we visit India, we would run out of alternatives because allergies are not that common in India, and there is not a lot of awareness about that. So, a lot of people were telling us about various healing methods for this, for allergies. Some medical, some non-medical, some spiritual, and we were in a bit of a dilemma at some point, but mostly we thought we would just leave it to Guruji, until actually Guruji came in my wife's dream one day and said, "Don't worry, I'll fix him when he's ready." So that's what he said, and nothing more. He didn't give a time limit as to I'll cure him by the time he's this age, or that. Nothing like that. He just said when time comes. So the time came when he was 10 years old. So he suddenly grew out of the soya and the milk allergies, which was actually good enough for us. Not allergies very common, and usually that's for life. He has grown out of a couple of nut allergies as well, but it's still not very safe. So he's still allergic to quite a few tree nuts like pistachio, cashew. So in Indian restaurants, we still have to be very careful. But other than that, day to day, dairy was the most constraining one. That's gone. That allergy is gone. Soya as well. So, and we're grateful to Guruji for that. For me, I would say what could have been a near-death experience. I was driving on the motorway in a brand new car. I mean, it was a second-hand one, but only a few years old. I just purchased it from one of the reputed dealers, and they had sold it to me without the bonnet latch. I didn't realize that it was just a Ford Mondeo, a pretty heavy car with a heavy bonnet. So I didn't even realize that the bonnet was actually not locked in. And when I raised that with them, they said, bring it to the dealership. We're just going to fix it. We have already ordered the part. So that means they knew that part was missing, but that didn't stop them from selling it to me. They just didn't want to lose the customer. That's why, they just sold it to me, thinking they're going to fix it down the line. So I was driving the car back to the dealership. I took the motorway. The moment I hit 70 miles an hour, the bonnet just flew open. Luckily, I wouldn't say luckily, I think Guruji's blessings, it was raining at the time and the wiper was on. So when the bonnet opened and hit the windshield, it actually didn't break the glass. It just hit the wiper, which is why the glass didn't break back and fall on me. But still, traveling at 70 miles an hour, right lane of the motorway, it could have been fatal. I couldn't see anything in front because the bonnet was all covering everything in front of me. But somehow I didn't, at the point, I don't know how, I didn't panic. I indicated to the left, crossed the other two lanes, and parked on the hard shoulder. And after I had parked the car, I realized what had happened, how serious it could have been. And at that moment, I was felt like I was collapsing, but that was for a moment. And then after that, obviously, the police came, and I didn't have to face anything on the administrative side or on the insurance side, because the dealership that had sold me the car, they fixed everything. And so it didn't cause me any long-term damage, except made me a very cautious driver. So when I go to places, I try to look up the route, and because that day I was not supposed to have traveled by the motorway, I should have known that the bonnet might have flown open. I went there only because I was new to the Satnav, the way it worked, and if I knew to use it a bit more in depth, then I should have been able to avoid the motorway. And if I avoided the motorway, I would have hit 70 miles an hour. So the good thing that came from it is it has made me a more careful driver. then I probably would have been without that. And Guruji saved my life anyway. So no harm done. I'm just trying to look up whether I've covered everything that I meant to cover um, uh, around things that that I couldn't cover in Light of Divinity. So yes, and apart from that, I think I've more or less covered everything. And there are a few things that are more generic. So it's about Guruji's fragrance. I've had it. I smelled it here in Southall, in one Gurdwara, very distinctly near the Guru Granth Sahib. I'm pretty sure. There was no one else near, and I had the same fragrance. It's very similar to the one that we used to get when Guruji would pass us at times when we would sit at the Sangat. There was once a time when his robe touched my t-shirt. He was just passing and his robe touched my t-shirt. And when I went back home, this was in Delhi, I wouldn't give that t-shirt. I wouldn't put that into the machine for washing or give it to for washing for a long time because I didn't want to lose that smell. Even when I did, I think it was only after a few washes that it actually lost the smell. So, but he had just passed close to me, and his robe had just touched my t-shirt for what, maybe part of a second, and yet had that smell for ages. Then there was once when I've been a diabetic since I was 29. At least it got detected when I was 29. So once he was Prasad, instead of Kara Prasad, I think we had, so he was giving away sweets, something like a Kalakand, and he just picked up, I roughly counted 10 when he eventually gave them to me. And I was thinking, this is Guruji's Prasad and I'm a diabetic. I'm eating 10 Kalakands, it can't be good for me. But because Guruji gave them to me, I ate them all. And the next day when I did a test, it came out to be perfect. It's not that he cured my diabetes, because that's probably something he wants me to be careful of. Without that, maybe I would have eaten a lot more because that's one of my vices. But on that day, it was my sugar count was perfect, even after eating so many sweets. And then there was a time when my first assignment in the UK lasted 4 months, and I had prayed for it to extend, but Guruji wouldn't listen. So until the last moment, I kept thinking that it would get extended. Until actually we set out for the airport to catch the flight. At the airport, I realized why he hadn't extended it for 1 month or maybe for a single day, because that was the day when my wife's ticket was expiring. It was a short assignment, so I had to pay for my wife's ticket. And it had an expiry date that was 4 months from the date of purchase or the date of the outward journey. And if I had stayed there only for 1 more day, then I would have had to buy new tickets for her, which would have been very expensive at the time. So I didn't know that. So I prayed hard to Guruji, and Guruji refused to listen. And then I understood why. So as Akashji was saying before, what he doesn't choose to listen to, he has reasons which obviously we can't see at the time. So that's roughly all I had. There could be a lot more if I think through, but I think we're running out of time anyway. So with all with my heartfelt thanks and gratitude and respect for Guruji for all what he's done for us and is still doing, I would sign off and hand it back to Akashji.
Jai Guruji, uncle, and always grateful to Guruji, and every experience, har tajurba, एक unique experience hai. You said the word generic, but those generic things are very specific to you.
Oh yeah, they are.
And, everything doesn't happen to everybody. Guruji gives the most needed and most desired things. When he doesn't fulfill your desires, he is actually taking care of your welfare. And
True.
I've had experience. I wanted a posting in a particular way, but I got something else. But that was a gateway to a much better existence in the long term. I complained to him, Guruji, why not you give it to me? He didn't answer. So once he didn't answer, I accepted that probably it's for my good. And had a year of difficulty followed by 15 years of extreme comfort and extreme efficient working. So what we need to ask him is whatever he wants to do for us, that's the best course. And be grateful, be thankful to him. So I sometimes ask
and
you
not
just
judges to wise.
I say, अपनी रहमत से यूं तू मेरी रूह का जाम भर दे. Fill up my soul with your रहमत. तेरा दरस देखूं, तेरा ख्याल सोचूं, ये इंतजाम करते हैं. मालिक दो जहान का है तू, सब है तेरी इजाजत से. मेरी हर आती जाती सांस में अपना नाम भर दे. मेरी आती जाती सांस में अपना नाम भर दे. So that's about what I ask on a constant basis. Otherwise, whatever you think suitable for us, suitable for the humankind, please give it Guruji. And thanks for everything, Guruji. वासन अंकल, सबको छुट्टी देने के लिए आप आइए.
जय गुरुजी महाराज.
जय गुरुजी.
Uncle, Guru Sankar has witnessed a blissful and divine Sangat sharing from you today.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
It was a divine satsang sharing. And Sejay Uncle, thanks a lot for coordinating and interacting. Uncle, एक शेर और होना चाहिए आपकी तरफ से. आज शेर कम है आज.
अगर गुरुजी की परमिशन है तो आई विल गो फर्दर. तेरे दर की महिमा कहने की किसी की बिसात कहाँ. तेरे दर की महिमा कहने की किसी की बिसात कहाँ. तेरे रूप की गरिमा कहने की किसी की औकात कहाँ. तेरी कृपा की सीमा बताए कोई मनुष्य की जात कहाँ. कहने वाले कहते हैं उतनी ही जितनी वो जान पाते हैं. कहने वाले कहते हैं उतनी ही जितनी वो जान पाते हैं. तुझ परमात्मा का भेद किसी के बस की है बात कहाँ. तुझ परमात्मा का भेद किसी इंसान के बस की है बात कहाँ.
वेरी नाइस. जय गुरु जी.
जय.
अंकल हमारे यहाँ गेस्ट आए हुए हैं. ऑलरेडी सुना है आपका शेर और आपको भी उन्होंने काफी दोस्त किया है. बहुत अच्छा बोला. जय गुरु जी.
जय गुरु जी.
इसी के साथ मैं होस्ट से रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा, गुरु जी महाराज से आगे दिलवाएंगे. जय गुरु जी.
जय
गुरु महाराज. शुक्राना मेरे मालिक.
जय गुरु जी. शुक्राना अनंतम अनंतम शुक्राना गुरु जी महाराज.
जय गुरु जी. शुक्राना गुरु जी.
जय गुरु जी. थैंक यू गुरु जी.
जय गुरु जी. शुक्राना गुरु जी. मेहर करो गुरु जी. सरपटा
जय गुरु जी. शुक्राना गुरु जी.
शुक्राना गुरु जी.
जय गुरु जी.
जय गुरु जी.
जय गुरु जी.